Sorry, you got cut out after
good.
Chelsea. Okay, so let me know when we're live.
We're gonna jump in right about now.
Woo!
Are we live, Josh?
Yeah, it's being stupid. I have to go to Brady
Awesome.
Bunch.
But we're live though.
Yeah, we're live. They can hear you.
Kick ass! Welcome to Slow News Day Live. My name is Steve Boykin. I am here in half burnout Boulder Creek, California. Joining me, as always, is my kick-ass co-host Glory Jones. And this morning, we are incredibly fortunate to be joined by both Vanessa Beeley and Juan Passarelli. I am really looking forward to this conversation. I think we can go off on all kinds of incredibly horrifically entertaining tangents. So the U.S. had a presidential selection. It is becoming more and more obvious the vote was less than legitimate once again. I don't believe that I've experienced a free and fair election in this country in my lifetime. In fact, if we were a brown country, the U.S. already would have invaded us so that we could have free and fair elections after sending in multiple teams of UN observers. And since I have two guests today, one in Damascus and one in London, I want to get kind of an idea of what the feel on the ground there is about the possible or the inevitable, I guess, Biden presidency. And just sort of the overall reaction globally to yet another complete and total clusterfuck on behalf of the U.S. electoral process.
Can I just ask, Steve, when you say you haven't lived through a fair election process, is that because of the electoral college situation or just fraud?
I'm going to go with fraud overall.
In the case of myself, I can definitely say fraud. I can confidently say fraud. I don't know about the 20-year head start that Steve has on me, but since 2000, there's been fraud every election.
Here's the thing. When you've got electronic voting machines that have proprietary software that every year get hacked by like 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds just to show it can be done. And then you can't even file a Freedom of Information Act request or sue for the hard drives to see what the machines did with the votes and how they did it. You know, that on its face, at least to me, screams illegitimate election. Not only that, we've got, legal ballot harvesting. We've got legal gerrymandering. We've got legal programs like Interstate Crosscheck that kick all kinds of black and brown names off of the voter rolls. Electioneering, the list goes on and on. So by the time you get to the Electoral College, basically what it does at this point is prevents New York and California from deciding every presidential election based on sheer population. It's an antiquated institution. I'm sure it could use some tweaking, but I live in California and I don't want us deciding every presidential election.
Fair enough. I heard half of it because I got cut off.
Oh yeah,
which will happen from time to time. But it's been interesting. It's been interesting on my side, especially when considering what will happen to Julian Assange. Right?
Yes.
To be honest, I have no clue, absolutely no clue, what a Biden presidency would look like in the next year. Which is the most likely outcome. Will he continue with this? We know that Baratzer's decision will come on the 4th. Whatever party wins, which is most likely going to be the prosecution, that is the U.S., will whoever loses, will appeal. And Biden takes power around the 20-something of January.
Yeah.
So the appeal process is gonna be already on their way, unless for some weird reason Barr decides now politically it's not gonna be good for us, and we're not gonna appeal. If Julian wins, I don't see that happening, to be honest. I think it's gonna go to the Supreme Court. Just can't predict anything before April, which is the point where the judge can say when the next hearing is going to take place. Usually they take, I think it's April the 3rd. Usually for complex cases, they take 3 or 4 months. This being a very complex case, it's likely that it'll be several months. So we're talking about a hearing in October. But as we know, this has been an extremely irregular case, and maybe they will just try and fast track it. And we could soon see him trying to go to the European Court of Human Rights. And there is a possibility that in between the appeal of Court of Human Rights and them accepting it, they might just render him or kidnap him to the United States. So everything is on the table right now.
Yeah. I mean, you can't say it more fair than that. Vanessa, it's been a couple of weeks since we last spoke on camera. At any rate, the BBC 4, did they start airing that hit piece on you yet?
No, we had a very nice email from Chloe telling us that it's going to be aired tomorrow.
Oh,
and they're going to town. I mean, it's going to be across the BBC spectrum, right? Not only on Radio 4, they're repeating it on, I think it's one of the other stations, like I don't know which one. And it's been increased, I think, from 10 to 15 episodes. So clearly they're trying to cram as much, smear material in there that they possibly can.
Real quick, Juan, if you're not hip to this, I'll let Vanessa explain it, because she promised me a rant too. So we'll
actually, the rant is more about the idiots that I've seen all day going, "Yay, Trump's gone! We've got Biden!"
Thank you. Oh my God!
Miracle. Seriously, what is wrong with Americans?
Listen,
you have a memory of a goldfish, for fuck's sake. This guy has been in office since 1973. He's bombed every freaking country he can possibly get his hands on. Right? Patriot Act. People will be masked and gagged and freaking muzzled for the rest of their life, and they'll be jabbed with toxins. I mean, all because he likes Floyd. I'm sorry, but like the race issue it exists, but people are so wrapped up in domestic policy, anti-racism. Trump's a freaking redneck. Yeah, he's a redneck, but hold on, Biden's going to be bombing millions of brown people in other countries in the world faster than you can say boo. And these people are all over social media kind of going, "Yay, Trump's gone."
And regardless of what you think of Trump, Biden is a racist too. Like it really makes me feel some type of way to see all these liberals and progressives take to the streets faster to celebrate Biden winning than to protest for the people that his policies killed. Like,
exactly. And how many
how many people have been locked up because of the crime bill?
Too many.
Come on, Biden. Okay, who's the first person? One of the first people to congratulate him, apart from Netanyahu, Madeleine Albright.
Oh my God,
I
yes.
mean, between them, they killed 500,000 kids in Iraq, but he's not racist. I mean, it's just I've been doing. My head has been exploding today with
Yes.
all these leftist activists, pro-Palestinians, people I thought had a brain, who don't understand that America's just gone through a freaking coup d'état, for God's sake. The voting is rigged. Trump's announcements are getting interrupted by mainstream media. I mean,
They're straight cutting him. Rupert Murdoch is like, fuck it, he's not my guy anymore. I'm out. Cut his feed. Cut his feed. Like,
Twitter is straight up censoring every single time he tweets, and people are putting it on.
oh.
Can I just ask, coming back a little bit, because I'm not entirely sure of
Sorry,
your
that was a
background,
complete rant.
Vanessa. Are you talking about the White Helmets documentary in Channel 4? Okay, now I know who you are. Okay.
Yeah, Vanessa and her colleague and friend of the show, Eva Bartlett, are subjects of this hit piece. Peter Ford, former ambassador, from my understanding, gets dragged in this too. Like
Pierre Robinson, the working group, the OPCW whistleblowers. I mean, it's insane. I mean, actually, just coming back seriously, thank you for bringing me back down to earth, but I really needed to get that off my chest.
Me too.
Oh my God. And I'm not a Trump supporter, and I'm not QAnon. It's like, that's the only thing people can say to me. It's like the whole Syria thing. You're just an Assadist. No, I'm not a Trumpist. I hate Trump. But Trump at least is transparent in his criminality, right? He's not ramped up wars. He's maintained wars that were pre-existing thanks to Obama and Biden. By the way, Biden, it's like, hello, Biden launched all these wars, right? And if
let's
he
not
comes
forget
in,
George
they're gonna
Bush.
escalate. Yeah, of course. But Biden's been there since 73. So
Yeah.
Biden is a part of the whole.
Just this morning, CNN announced that the Biden campaign will be relying heavily on Dick Cheney for their foreign policy.
Hello.
Are you fucking kidding me?
I'm not. I'll go. I'll pull up the
very high
tweet.
probability that Susan Rice is going to be in his administration as well, which is a guaranteed war with Russia, basically.
Well, if you're responsible for the Rwandan genocide, why wouldn't you be in Joe Biden's cabinet? Why wouldn't you be at Secretary of State? I mean, it's a
wasn't he recently boasting about the intervention in Ukraine as well?
Yes.
I mean, you know, and apart from his crypto pedophilia, I mean, let's not get into that. I mean, Epstein is saluting him from the grave, right? I mean, it's
here,
just
right here's the tweet. CNN says Dick Cheney will be advising Biden on foreign policy. Now, I am not a Rhodes Scholar, or even that much of a man of the world, but I do know that Dick Cheney should be nowhere near anyone's foreign policy. In fact, the only place Dick Cheney should be is in a very small cell at The Hague.
Exactly.
No,
and
for me, the thing that worried me most about a Biden presidency was that allies, European allies, and other countries that have big armies and have helped invade all these countries, they're going to immediately say, well, "Yay, we're back to normal."
yeah.
But back to normal is pretty insane. It's at least in the last 20 years since 9/11. It's been, and I'm from Guatemala, where, you know, the second coup d'etat from the CIA happened, right, in 1954. So I know very well what U.S. foreign policy is, and I'm actually extremely afraid about what the foreign policy is going to be.
Yeah. Absolutely. And look, I can pinpoint two things that have happened since Biden effectively stole the election, or since it was announced that he's probably won it. I don't know if legally yet he is president of the US, or if Trump will leave the White House, etc., or we're just going to get plunged into the chaos that the transition integrity, anything with integrity in it, is totally lacking in any integrity project. But if I look at the East Turkestan Islamic movement, has just been taken off the terrorist list quietly in the US on the 4th of November. I can speak personally here. The Christian town of Al-Skarbiya in northern Hamar on the borders with Idlib that was liberated late last year. I spent considerable time there under Nusra Front rockets and missiles. It was targeted with 4 Grad missiles just 2 days ago. So that's an indication to me that the terrorists here are thinking, yay, Biden, you know, the tap's going to get turned back on, the arms are going to start flowing again. Yeah, we can start using our Grad missiles because there'll be more coming in. That's a clear indicator for me. And at the same time, Bellingcat, who's of course in cahoots with the BBC and Emma Winberg and MI6, etc., Atlantic Council, NATO, blah, 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 has just produced a report saying that this guy, who's the leader of the National Defense Forces in the Christian town of Al-Skarbiya, so these forces are volunteer forces defending the townspeople against the terrorist, sectarian, extremist groups that are surrounding and besieging them, is a war criminal, apparently, for defending his people, according to Bellingcat and according, effectively, to MI6. And by the way, my name's in that report as well, so clearly the whole war crime thing is, you know, it's a recurrent theme, right? So now they're trying to paint basically every single Syrian that took up arms to defend itself against an internationally backed invasion of their country by head chopping mad people is going to be a war criminal for defending themselves. I mean, this is just the whole Zionist playbook, right? This is like, you know, the Palestinians that don't have a matchstick to throw at a tank are the criminals for defending themselves against disproportionate force from the Zionist entity. It's exactly the same playbook, and we're getting it all over again. You know, it's extraordinary. So I've already seen 2 very clear indicators that Biden's coming in is going to unleash hell on this planet, because of course the Uyghur groups that are trying to set up the caliphate in the Xinjiang province of China, which of course will prevent the Belt and Road Initiative, it will maintain American hegemony, global supremacy, it'll prevent China spreading out and expanding, heaven forbid, from a trade basis, you know. So we're already seeing the filthy roots of Bidenism coming through.
Well, I just have to say I'm happy to be in a panel with a fellow target of the intelligence services in the West.
That's the only people I know at this point, Juan. The only people that will still talk to me are already on some sort of list.
I think I'm definitely on a no-fly list somewhere.
You know, in February of this year, well, I get it, technically it was in right around this time last year when we started fundraising for our first set of actions during the first phase of Julian's hearing. We were crowdfunding to send both me and Taylor to London, and then Andrew and the rest of the crew would hold it down in DC. And I went to go get my passport renewed, and they came up with a reason to not give me a passport and to trap me here in the US. And it was resultant from, or what they said was, because I had gotten arrested in the year 2000 and had this entirely expunged from my record. They were like, oh no, you got arrested on felony charges in the year 2000, so we can't give you a passport. And I'm like, but it's expunged. It's not part of my record. I can, you know, vote again and do all of these other things that you're supposed to be able to do when you're not a felon. Why can't I have my passport? And they're like, oh no, I mean, it might be a clerical error, but we can't give you a passport now. I actually had a hearing set for the second week of April over it, but because of COVID, it was shut down. The State Department was like, no, we're not going to do it. You can just stay in the US. And it's like, okay, on one hand, it may be good to be in the heart of the empire, but on the other hand, it's not when the empire doesn't want you around or talking. You know, and I'm not going to shut up. So I'll go down fighting.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, maybe in a couple months you can apply for those nice little common passes.
Right. Maybe I'll get, you know, I'll get put on a list for not having an immunity passport anyway.
I think those will.
There's always asylum.
Yeah. Or I could go the John McAfee route and become a deranged billionaire and just hide out in international waters on a yacht.
I wonder how Pirate John is.
I'm safer here than anywhere outside. Despite the fact that probably everything's going to get seriously ramped up now. And actually, I was talking with Ryan the other day. I think I mentioned to you, Steve, about
that was a fantastic interview, by the way.
Oh, was it? We were both a bit kind of drained, actually, but yeah, we kind of.
No, it's good. I just watched it.
But yeah, I mean, you know, the potential now. I mean, we know that to a large degree, anyway, this entire election is pure theater, and it's intended to push America further into chaos and conflict. And as we've said before, you know, this entire hybrid war strategy that they've turned on prey nations like Syria, Iraq, Libya, Guatemala, Venezuela, etc., is now being turned in on their own people. And that's what we're seeing. As I said, we're witnessing a coup d'etat. That'll be followed by probable kind of close to civil war, certainly conflict if Trump resists. And of course, if the theater plays out, of course he will resist. And then you're going to have, you know, demonstrations on the streets, etc. And this is going to drag out, right? And then the potential for an incoming false flag, certainly all the chatter, as Whitney Webb pointed out in those 3 amazing segments with Last American Vagabond. That girl's just outstanding, right? I mean,
it's like 8 hours.
Remember
all of it.
It's mind-blowing.
I was recently recording Noam Chomsky, which I encourage everybody to go to the Don't Extradite Assange campaign YouTube and look at. It's a 10-minute.
Beans.
I'll have to repeat that.
Passarelli down. That's Don't Extradite Assange on YouTube. And a 10-minute interview with Noam Chomsky.
I'm back.
There you are.
Okay. Sorry. So it was an amazing. Well, apart from the fact that you get to talk to one of your heroes, right? Which is always something great. Hello, Professor Chomsky. How are you doing? Yeah, I'm very good. He did this amazing statement where he basically, in the end, said that the population of any country that is quote unquote democratic is the enemy of the elites and the people in power, because they have too many rights, and the only way to be able to maintain them calm and make sure that they keep power is through the media. But hearing Chomsky saying that basically the American people are the enemies of the state is pretty chilling, especially coming from an intellectual of that kind, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just incredible.
So I'm not trying to pick on Noam Chomsky. I'm not. But Chomsky did spend about a year telling us that we had to vote for Joe Biden. And I respect Noam Chomsky very, very, very much. In fact, like manufacturing consent, I got a hold of right around the same time I got a hold of Behold a Pale Horse. So that was a weird week. And it's the inspiration for why I'm going to write a book called Manufacturing Confusion, because I believe that consent has been manufactured. Consent was manufactured, if not before, then while the ink was drying on the Patriot Act. And the role of the media now is to barrage us with counter-reinforcing propaganda 24 hours a day to create abject confusion among not just the voting populace, but people in general. So everybody's walking around half right because they all believe that the other political party is corrupt, and they all believe that the other media outlets are corrupt, but they still think theirs are just fine. And being half right means that 50% isn't a passing grade anywhere. But Chomsky nails it, dude. He does. The people are the enemies of the state at this point. That's why there's so much surveillance. That's why there's so much targeting of individual citizens. That's why there's such a push to clamp down on speech online in general. You know, I would be interested in hearing what Chomsky's take on the world is a year into not Joe Biden's, but Kamala Harris's first year in office, because I don't believe for a moment that Joe Biden will be around for very long as president. I think that this whole setup was to ensure that the candidate that was christened in the Hamptons in 2018, Kamala Harris, is the one in the driver's seat, or at least the one with the best public relations for the oligarchy job on the planet.
I agree.
Yeah.
I would also question why Chomsky manufactured consent for the war against Syria.
There's a
Sorry. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I would question, and had I had the chance to ask Chomsky, I would have asked him why he effectively manufactured consent for the war against Syria. He supported the revolution, he supported intervention, and he describes the Assad government as the regime, etc. He's effectively supported and manufactured consent for the war against Syria for the last 10 years. He hasn't changed tack on that. And that was a massive, massive disappointment for me.
Right, I did not know that.
No.
I have a theory that that institutional security, especially the kind of institutional security that Noam enjoys, that Cornel West enjoys, Angela Davis, certainly, that sort of, that it's so cliche to say ivory tower, but the comfortability and security that comes with people in their position also means you're constantly sort of nodding in agreement with the establishment, because if you stick your neck out too far, you wind up like Cynthia McKinney, unable to teach anywhere in the United States. She had to go to East West University in Bangladesh to get a job. And the ostracizing of her voice was so missed for about 3 years here, when she remains one of the very few competent former members of Congress that we have.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think, and to speak to that as well, I think a lot of figures like Chomsky and a lot of, you know, Western leftists or Western anarchists in general, they also have a major kind of like major shortcomings when it comes to considering Western imperialism into their theory, like Noam Chomsky manufacturing consent with the war in Syria. Or you also saw in America a lot of people who were, you know, self-alleged socialists being the most like CIA-friendly socialists ever and just cheering on every act of intervention ever. It's like, bro, are you sure you're a leftist here? Because the anti-imperialist lens is something that really died during the Obama administration with a lot of Western leftists in particular.
Yeah, I also think the Palestinian element played a huge part in a number of people going down the bad Assad route. I mean, Norman Finkelstein supported the revolution right from the beginning, to the point where he was even carrying FSA flags. A huge percentage of the Palestinian movement went down the route because they were sold on, you know, Assad oppressing the Palestinians in Yarmouk camp and all this kind of, the media has played such a dirty role in Syria, as it always has done, but because Syria, the war against Syria has gone on for 10 years, you know, I mean, extraordinary, really. But I think, yeah, the Palestinian issue, as fraudulent as it was, it played a huge part in a lot of these intellectuals like Chomsky, like Finkelstein, who was sold on Syria being an enemy of Palestine, which is just insane if you think about it. I mean, it's, you know, when Hamas were expelled, the first place they came to was Damascus. They then betrayed Syria completely, Hamas, and they've been working with Al-Qaeda inside Syria to destabilize Syria, and that all started way before 2011. But yeah, I think the Palestine issue has played a huge part in many of these people sort of opting for the R2P, the responsibility to protect option, you know, regardless of the intricacies and the complexities on the ground here. I mean, Liwa al-Quds are one of the biggest brigades of the Syrian Arab Army, made up of Palestinians that actually liberated East Aleppo, because that's where the majority of the Palestinian communities here lived, and form part of the Liwa al-Quds brigades. So all of this is kind of lost in the reductionism of the media narratives on Syria.
Well,
how does it feel? What is it like in the ground right now in Damascus, in Syria?
It's a bit like the lull before the storm. And that's very much what we feel here with, and that's what's driving me crazy today. I mean, I'm seeing people that have come to Syria as part of US delegations celebrating Biden. And I'm just, have you lost your minds? You know, everyone here is just, it's literally like they're in kind of suspended animation. Even today I was talking to a load of people. They're really worried. You know, under Trump, I'm not saying Trump was a good guy. He did a lot of really shitty things, not only here, but in Yemen and globally. But there was an element of weird stability. Like, he was perfectly transparent. Yeah, we're here to take the oil. You know? There's none of the subterfuge that you get from every single other president, where you get all the script, you know, and then what they're doing behind the script. And when I see people today sort of saying, yeah, but at least Biden's talking about love and peace and compassion, and I'm like, what happened to your memory?
Coming from somebody that really is not. I don't know the ins and outs of Syria that well, unfortunately. So maybe my questions are very basic. But
no.
How's the government doing? Are they back in control? Are they being able to rebuild the massive destruction that has been going on for the last 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, the government has actually, astoundingly, they've never lost control. And that's something, you know, salaries have still been paid, bread is still being given, subsidies are still being given on food, healthcare is still free, education is still virtually free in the state universities. And now with liberation of probably 85, maybe more now, 85% of Syrian territory, refugees are starting to come back. People are starting to rebuild and restore. Of course, then what does America do? It then imposes increased sanctions under the Caesar law this year. You know, it creates devastation, economic devastation in Lebanon. It closes borders under the pretext of COVID-19. It occupies the oil fields so that we don't have electricity, we don't have fuel, we don't have gas in the air, blah, blah, blah. You know, sets fire to crops, cuts off water supply through Turkey, another NATO member. So yeah, of course, you know, the hybrid war continues, but actually, as I said, it's difficult to describe, but under Trump, there was a degree of stability. There was at least enough of a breath that people could start rebuilding. They could start coming back and coming back home. Making, you know, getting the services turned. Things were relatively stable. Now people are really scared. They're really worried because they know Biden's history. They know that any kind of preemptive strike, and that's what I was talking about with Ryan, the chances of, you know, I'm not saying there's going to be an EMP attack per se, but there's a very strong chance that now with Biden in power, you've got the kind of militarist war hawk neoconservatism that is going to be calling, you know, if James Woolsey, for example, is advising him, then people are going to be telling him, we need a preemptive strike before Iran, you know, before the North satellite develops nuclear warheads. And, you know, I mean, this is how crazy it will get. And a war against Iran, of course, Iran is here. Right, every time Israel bombs here, it claims it's Iranian positions or Hezbollah positions, and so Syria is completely in the crosshairs at that point, and the war will be ratcheted up, and that's so people now are thinking, shit, you know, we're just dealing with sanctions, we're dealing with closed borders, we're dealing with, you know, the effects of COVID, and now. But
and that 80, that 15% that you said is not liberated. What's there?
Al Qaeda. That's in Idlib in the northwest. You've basically got actually
which
Syria
is financed by Saudi Arabia.
No, it's financed by the entire U.S. coalition. So
yeah,
it's financed by the
State
UK,
Department
by the U.S.
figures heavily
Turkey,
in their financing.
Yeah, and the UK Foreign Office.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Saudi Arabia is used as a proxy.
Yeah.
But it's
actually, I'd swap it around. I'd say America is a proxy of Saudi Arabia.
That's fair.
Yeah, because Saudi is actually paying American troops to be here.
Oh, that's right. You know, there's a clip of John Kerry when he was Secretary of State in the Obama-Biden administration. Like laying it all out in terms of raw numbers.
America is Saudi's bitch in Syria, actually.
Yeah. And I saw earlier today a very, very congratulatory, heartfelt tweet on Benjamin Netanyahu's part.
Yeah.
Saying that Joe Biden has always been a great friend to Israel and Kamala Harris is such a good friend to Israel.
Speaking at all those APAC conferences and all that mess.
Kamala Harris's APAC conference speech sounds like it was written by Mike Pompeo. Like it's fucking bad. Like it is, and Harris is nothing more than a dead-eyed, soulless servant to power. And when power says, Yeah. Well, Biden's got instant grits in his head where his brain used to be. Like, I'm not even not considering him too much in this overall situation. It's Harris that is effectively going to be leading the country in the same way that George H.W. Bush did during Reagan's 2 terms. You know, Bush got to be president for 12 years. Harris could conceivably be president for 10 to 12 years. If Biden stays in office for a day longer than 2 years and then is suddenly, you know, steps on a rainbow, Harris becomes president and she's still legally allowed to run twice.
Yeah.
Can I just ask another? I'm just being really naive and stupid, but I would hear your thoughts on Russia in Syria.
Russia has been in Syria actually for decades, probably more than 50 years. So it's had the naval base at Tartus on the eastern Syrian coast for a very long time. Russia's campaign in Syria, actually, I highly recommend to anyone, because it's an excellent book, to read Operation Aleppo by Tim Ripley. And Ripley is a Sunday Times contributor. So this is a mainstream journalist who also writes for, I think, is it James' website about defense and weapons and so on. Russia came into Syria in 2015, so it came in relatively late, actually, in the conflict. And it came in at a stage that Syria was struggling on too many fronts against too many very well-equipped terrorist mercenary groups. And Russia has been instrumental from that point on in the successful military campaign against the terrorist factions and the Syrian extremist factions, the Muslim Brotherhood factions in Syria that have historically been a tool of deep state to destabilize Syria whenever it kind of has a government that looks like it's going to be way too strong for Israel to cope with. Basically, that's what it boils down to. So Russia's role has been pivotal in the success of the Syrian military campaign. Now, of course, we reach a point where the military campaign is largely finished. There's only Idlib and, of course, America in the northeast. Under Trump, I totally believe that if Idlib were liberated, I don't think the American troops would stay very long in the northeast because they're too isolated, they're too vulnerable, and the Kurds are too easily persuaded to flip the other way. They're not a reliable proxy for the US. So the US would be very vulnerable at that point once Idlib was liberated. And of course, they're also trying to handle the kind of rogue expansionism of the neo-Ottoman Erdogan at the same time into Libya and into Azerbaijan, etc., etc. So America has a lot on its plate if it stays inside Syria. And of course, Iranian expansionism because of American expansionism. This is the crazy thing. America bangs on and on and on about the threat of Iranian expansionism, which of course it's Israel really saying that. And then they create the conditions in which Iran can expand. This is, the ultimate.
Just this morning, freaking added the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, saying like, "Oh, you're in no place to talk about our elections, Mr. Khamenei, because you can't even spend money at home. Your elections are a sham. You spend all your money on these proxy wars." And it's like, yeah, because otherwise there's gonna be terrorists right next to them. So it was interesting.
Yeah, and that's one of the main reasons for Iran and Russia to be fighting in Syria, apart from the historic defense treaty between Syria and Iran. But for Russia, it's also, the problem is Syria has turned into this world war because Russia and Iran and even China are trying to contain the terrorist threat inside Syria to prevent it expanding out to their borders, right? You know, the Chechens going back to Russia, the various terrorist groups going back to Iran, the Uyghurs to China. So, of course, it's better for them to kettle them all inside Syria and try and get rid of them there. Also, not forgetting that they're preventing them, that they're containing them and preventing them from getting into Europe, etc., etc., etc. So it's not only self-interest, but that's one of the main agendas for the Russian intervention, for sure, is to defend their own position and to prevent the usage of those terrorist groups by the US coalition against Russia, against Iran, against China, which is what we're seeing. You know, the de-terrorization of the Uyghur terrorist groups that are some of the most barbaric and brutal groups inside Syria, and many of them now, of course, are in Idlib. Russia has its self-interest, of course it does. You know, it's vying for power. And Syria has been a hugely successful campaign, diplomatically, politically, militarily for Russia. It's put it back on the map, if you like. It's really elevated it to being, you know, proportionate to America, to a large degree, to America's disgust. And of course, Biden's going to come in, you know, all guns blazing on this one. We know already.
I remember Julian speaking about Russia's involvement in Syria as an existential geopolitical threat, because it is the only base they have outside Russia, or, you know, near their borders, compared to the United States and its 300 nuclear bases around, you know, everywhere. So it was geopolitical, geostrategic place for them to protect. But I am so happy to hear that the life of Syrians is kind of returning to normal, considering the awful nature of what's going on in there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's degrees of normal. I mean, we're still living a pretty tough life, as I'm sure you know.
We see Libya, right? And then we see Syria. And Syria has maintained a government that functions and pays bills and supplies.
And actually, this is, I was talking to a member of the legitimate opposition the other day, and you know, we were actually discussing it, and he said, whatever criticism I have of President Assad, of the government, I take my hat off to the stability that they gave this country through 10 years of unbelievable pressure, military pressure, economic pressure, etc. And he said, without that, we would be lost. And that's coming from you know, an opposition member, leader, one of the higher up members of one of the biggest opposition parties, which of course Western media never talk to. They only ever talk to Syrian opposition outside Syria, right? That are already heavily invested into, you know, the entire war matrix. So yeah, I mean, if you were to come to, for example, the old city in Damascus on a Friday or Saturday night, you would think that you're in Chinatown or anywhere in the world, Paris. You know, people are out partying, they're out, I'm sorry, the cat is really determined to get in here tonight. But yeah, if you then go to Eastern Ghouta, if you go to Hafta, if you go to areas of Homs, if you go to Aleppo, Eastern Aleppo, Western Aleppo, yeah, the devastation is still there. But you know, Syrians are unbelievably resilient and resourceful. And that's something which the West always underestimates when it goes into one of these interventionist projects. It underestimates the resilience and resourcefulness of its enemy, as it has done in Yemen. You know, guys chewing cats and dressed in slippers and freaking dresses are beating Saudi Arabia. I mean, you know, with US, Qatari, UAE, UK, French backing, Israeli backing. You know, and this is what they underestimate, and that's what Syria. I mean, Syria is literally the cradle of civilization. It doesn't give up easily. It's been invaded so many times. It's lived through French occupation and beyond, you know, Ottoman Empire. It's survived all of them, and it will survive this.
It begs the question, because you're so right. Historically, the U.S. almost as policy underestimates the resilience of a native population when they go in. When you know, so it begs the question: is it an underestimation, or is it a guarantee that they'll be able to profit off of forever war? Because we clearly don't give a fuck about the lives of our soldiers that we commit over there. We definitely don't give a fuck about the native population of any country that we're in the process of escalatio or destabilization or overthrow. And every single time we do one of these where we just, you know, step all the way on our dick in terms of invading a new country, you see record profits for military and defense contractors, for the manufacturers of weapons of war, for, you know, rewards for the politicians who support this illegal, destructive, fucking maniacal act. So I you know, I don't want to sound conspiratorial or anything. But it does kind of beg the question as to whether or not they know exactly what kind of resistance they're going to be met with, and if they're looking at it as almost a boon.
I mean, I think if you, yeah, I mean, I think if you look at Libya, for example, which, yeah, clearly they've reduced down to a failed state. It's a terrorist vacuum. It's ripe for all manner of plundering, right? For one thing. I think in Syria, their intention now is to keep a kind of spoiler war going. So not allowing Syria to regain full stability, to maintain a US military presence to the northeast, to keep Idlib under some kind of occupation, and then to have kind of sleeper cells that can, you know, carry out isolated attacks every now and then in pretty much all of the country. So it maintains a level of instability that suits them, because that keeps the country in a state of permanent weakness, right? And an inability to return to pre-war prosperity. So yeah, that serves them. And of course, the military-industrial complex in every scenario is making money hand over fist. I mean, even in the UK, BAE profits went through the roof after the war in Yemen started in 2015. So we know that war makes huge amounts of money. At the same time, we also know that the American economy is on the verge of collapse, right? So, you know, to what extent is public opinion going to keep being fobbed off with endless proxy wars? Because, of course, since Iraq, they don't want actual American soldiers coming back in body bags. So then they came up with the idea of, oh, hey, let's use Al-Qaeda as our proxy and call it something else, right? So to some degree, that's given them a kind of a plausible deniability. But now people are starting to figure out that actually they've spent billions on giving arms to terrorists to basically carry out another interventionist illegal war against a sovereign nation. And there's only so long that people are going to actually keep, well, I say that, but they've just cheered on the election of Biden. So, and they fell for COVID-19.
It's normal. It's back to normal. This is
Yeah,
the reason that
yeah.
I'm so fucking scared. I mean,
Yeah.
I see the parallels with Guatemala, and you know, there's always been complaints about Guatemalans, Salvadorians, Hondurans all going to the United States, and you know, the bloody migrants, and build a wall, and you know, there's always since Bill Clinton, there's been you know, horrible immigration policies. But the thing is, they don't want these governments to be strong. They don't want them to be strong. You know, since in studying the violence in my countries, in these countries, especially the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, they have been in the top 10 most murderous countries in the world. That's per capita. So you're talking about Guatemala being number 3 in 2011. You know, Honduras being number 1 several years in a row. El Salvador because of the gang conflict, which, by the way, was exported by Bill Clinton and their deportation situation. And they say, you know, we want to help, and we're going to give these aid to the Northern Triangle. And you see where the aid is going to. It's going to the big fucking companies that don't do anything to create a society. And I mean, the measures that they're taking, they're not, you know, these countries are the countries that pay the least amount of taxes in the whole, but I don't know in the whole world, but at least in Latin America. It is they're extremely weak governments, and with very little resources to fight the increasing amount of violence that should be fought with social policies that give children the ability to not join a gang instead of you know, just football programs, just, you know, after school programs, you know, stuff that may give them a life that is better than becoming a gang. And then, you know, funny thing is, people will think that gang members in Central America, they're motivated by drugs and drug cartels. That's absolutely a lie. Drug cartels hate gangs.
Bah.
Yeah.
No.
Were some great points.
Yeah.
Oh, he'll be back.
Okay. Oh, there he is.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the drug cartels hate them because they're businessmen. The only reason that we see drug cartels killing each other in the northern border of Mexico is because of the specific geographic locations where it's best to traffic drugs. In the rest of Latin America, you see very quiet drug lords because they're businessmen. They don't want to kill people for the sake of killing people. They just want to transport their product in a safe way. And gangs do the opposite. Gangs have this weird cult-ish culture where you join the gang, and in the United States it's different. In the United States they do want to, and in here in the UK they do want to earn money. In Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, I've studied gangs and I've filmed gangs, and they're poor, and they stay poor for the rest of their lives, and they know that they're going to end up either in jail, in a hospital, or a cemetery. That's what they say all the time. And it's about a sense of belonging to this type of cult situation, and they get children the age of 8 starting in their gangs and murdering people at that age, and that's how they survive. And what do we see? A lawless country where the government situations that, you know, it's easily to hand over a mine to a Canadian company, or hand over some other piece of land to drill oil in the rainforest, or all of they protect American businesses, and they do it very well. So there's four powers in Central America, at least in Guatemala. There is the business owners, which are about 30 families that own 80% of the resources. They control the government, which is the second power. The third power are the military, which was aided by Israel and Ronald Reagan, and during the Cold War, and then they still maintain power today, and they have created these crazy labyrinths of structures of corruption that have not been able to be taken off because they are so profitable. And they smuggle arms, they smuggle goods, they just make people millionaire within the army. And then the other pillar of power, the most important one, is the embassy. I don't even have to tell you what embassy it is the embassy. And that's the one that everybody knows about.
Yeah, well said.
It sounds like Central America could benefit greatly from the programs and ideology that the Black Panthers were espousing in the 60s and 70s. And it would be cool if some cross-cultural happenings would be able to go on there.
Sorry, I missed you at it sounds like.
It sounds like it sounds like it's like Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras could benefit from a lot of the programs and ideologies espoused and put into action by the Black Panthers in the late 60s, early 70s here.
Oh, yeah.
We've been very fortunate on this show to be able to speak with my spiritual advisor,
I love her so much.
the Reverend Annie Chambers, who grew up in the Black Panthers, and her oldest brother James was Malcolm X's lieutenant. Even to this day, she still calls Malcolm X Minister Malcolm, because that's just it's ingrained. She was telling us about freedom schools the last time that she was on, and it was basically an incredibly similar situation where they were taking children who otherwise would have been thrown into a gang and putting them into a school program, pilot program, that was 100% ran, funded, and taught by members of the Black Panthers.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's a likelihood of something like that happening, but I'm gonna put it out to the universe, and well, that's as hippie as I'm gonna get today. I promise.
And I'll second that too. Yeah.
I need to scroll back up. There was a question for both of you guys early on. And if I can find it, I will ask. What do you guys think the likelihood of Trump pardoning Assange on the way out the door is? And would the UK even honor it, since he's a lame duck?
Sorry,
I might need to repeat it, Steve.
The likelihood of Julian being pardoned by Trump on his way out.
I mean, he said that he wanted to pardon Snowden. Julian's been mentioned less. I was talking to Eugene Jarecki, a filmmaker, and actually I spoke to Daniel Ellsberg yesterday about it, and he thought that the likelihood was very small, that he would do anything like that. And I was talking to Daniel Ellsberg because I thought, well, after the elections, it'd be interesting to see if, Spielberg directed the Post, right? The film about Ellsberg leaking to the Washington Post. And they met each other. So I was thinking, Dan, maybe you have the telephone number of Spielberg. Maybe he could, ask for the prosecution to be dropped. He said that it was very unlikely, first of all, that Spielberg would ask that from Trump, and that Trump would take it on. But maybe Biden would, if the Obama administration decided not to go ahead with the prosecution because of the New York Times problem. Not because they don't want to, but because of the New York Times problem. So I don't know. I think that maybe because he's already in the system, they might just go, let's just keep it that way. I think that that's a huge possibility. But who knows? Maybe they do decide that they want to have a First Amendment in the United States,
I mean, good stranger things have happened. But cynical me is leaning towards Joe Biden is a servant of the national security state. He always has been. He always will be. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that you could play and win Project for a New American Century bingo with what he's going to put in his cabinet.
And add to the fact that he called Julian a high-tech terrorist. So regardless of the fact that the Obama administration chose not to go ahead and push extradition charges onto Julian, I still think that, now that he's in prison, they'll kind of just keep it there if it happens. I mean, regardless, just still spread the word as much as possible. That's just the manifesto that I have, at least, is regardless of who's in office, I'm going to try to get people to speak about him, whether I'm adding Donald Trump or Marcus Rashford, for all I care. Who's a ring Manchester United, by the way, for those of you that didn't know.
And Action for Assange will be back in Washington, D.C. on January 4th when concierge for the U.S. State Department District Judge Vanessa Beeley reads her decision. And I will also be in Denver on December 10th for Human Rights Day. We're going to hold an action for Julian in coordination with that, which should be an internationally coordinated deal. We're working with a few people in the UK and over in Australia and New Zealand to try and pull this off.
Julian used to say that you want to have the person in power who is your opponent, because the checks and balances of your allies are going to be the ones that, put pressure on the opponent, which is an interesting idea. I'm not entirely sure that I agree completely with it. But in the case of the United States, the opponent, the main opponent of Julian Assange, unfortunately, because of the 2016 elections, are the Democrats. Mm-hmm. And having the Republicans trying to, if we manage to get the Republicans to put pressure on freedom of speech and what it could do to the country, maybe we could build a political movement around that. I don't know. It's just an idea that occurred to me on right now, right? I mean, the amount of Trump supporters I have following this case and following me surprises me. But they are the ones that care more about Julian Assange and care more about what the government had been doing under their name, even though the wars that we see right now were started. The wars that in the Middle East that we see right now are still the problem. Were started under a Republican president, but it seems like. And could potentially become an interesting political force to help Julian. I'm not saying it will happen. It's just an idea. Maybe it will. Maybe it won't.
We've long been advocating, talking to anyone and everyone, regardless of their political affiliation, about this, and it's you're so right, Juan. The people who have supported Donald Trump have done so, well, mostly because America is the most heavily propagandized nation on the planet, but also because the neoliberal order that Obama and Biden were caretakers for failed regular Americans so miserably. And there's no middle ground in this country anymore. You're either supposed to be 100% for something or 100% against it. Nuance being one of the first casualties when that weasel got stuck in the Large Hadron Collider in 2016 and made it do a hard stop, and that's what hurtled us into the stupidest possible timeline ever. But nuance is dead. Irony pretty dead. I look, man, I'm an activist, so I always have a little core of hope that surrounds the rest of my cold dead heart. So I will talk to anybody about this, and I will encourage anyone who may have, backed Trump in this, or backed Joe Jorgensen in this, or for some stupid reason backed Howie Hawkins in this, to now focus your energy on making for damn sure that the Biden administration knows we exist. We want Julian free. We want Julian free now. We want him to be compensated for the decade of his life that has been ripped away from him, and to the best of the West's ability, destroyed. So I'm with you, man. I'll scream that all day.
Yeah, same. And I think that's something that I've picked up in conversations I've had with like Trump supporters who are sympathetic to Julian, is I'll go up to them, ask them, can you support Assange? Can I trust you to pressure Trump on this issue, to push Trump on this issue, because you're his supporter, you're, boosting his support and his fundraising. And they're like, oh, yeah, I love Julian, but nah, it's cool. He's going to pardon him, or don't worry, I'll wait until Julian gets extradited here.
So now something has changed.
And I'm like, no, okay, but now that it looks like apparently Trump hasn't been selected and he won't have a second term, you can't rely on Trump. So you're going to have to get off your ass. You can't trust the plan your way out of this. You're going to have to get off your ass and stop being a sheepdog and really pressure Biden. So, I mean, that's kind of one thing that makes me, a bit hopeful about, a potential Biden administration, is the fact that we can potentially activate and mobilize what was Trump's base to now apply pressure on issues like, being anti-censorship and freeing Julian Assange. Because, while Trump was in office, you couldn't mobilize progressives for shit, because they were too busy being sheepdogged by thy holy Bernard Sanders and, the immortal Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So but now that Trump's out of office, his base is going to be, well, they're already going to be fired up because they're being effectively cheated out of this election. So, So I think that's a hope of mine, a hope of mine through all the cynicism and all the sheepdogging, is just that we can get the disaffected Trump supporters to be more staunch and more applying pressure when it comes to the issue of, Julian's persecution.
I love your new co-host, Steve. I just wanted to go back a little bit to,
I just lost that
to the idea that you mentioned the neoliberal establishment of the Democrat Party. This is very interesting because we're in the United States and at least in Guatemala, I see it as well. There is still this language of Cold War, McCarthyism, where Democrats are communists for some absolutely ridiculous reason. And I just don't, there is no left in the United States. There is no left in the United Kingdom. There was a little bit of Bernie Sanders, which was the left-est that we got to, but and they made the big fucking mistake of getting into the wide what is it called, wide tent of the Democratic Party rather than starting something fresh. I mean the same thing.
Meh.
Oh man.
I've just lost electricity and he's just lost internet.
I will say, while he's going on that rant though, before he comes back, fuck DSA and fuck Rose Twitter, because they are some sheepdogging punk asses. That's what I'll say about that. They could have.
Sorry, I was talking for myself for quite a while before I noticed I was out. But anyways, my comment was, I mean, we really need to get off of this McCarthyist, communist, left-right situation, because there, as I put in my documentary, Julian says, all political theories are bankrupt because we don't know how the internal workings of our institutions work, and only through vast amounts of documentation will we actually be able to build a map towards something that can tell us what is the way forward, right?
Yeah.
What's the best way forward? But if we don't know what our institutions are doing, how can we possibly say left, right, center, fucking Trotskyist, or it's mute, it's gone. But it is a great piece of propaganda, right?
I've got a couple of
communists.
Got a couple of different theories on this, and maybe we can kick some of them around. The reason that you get accusations of communism hurled at multi-millionaires like Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden or any of those people is because that shit still works. Like
it does, and it works on Miami Cubans because they.
That's my family.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
My uncle was trained by the CIA to go to the Bay of Pigs.
Oh wow!
Sorry.
Yeah, I actually grew up in Miami, so like I was very much like I grew up surrounded by like the Latin American diaspora. So and like almost everybody has immediate skepticism of any policy that's remotely socialist, because it's like, oh no, like my grandparents fled Cuba, like my grandparents left Venezuela to get away from that, and it's like your grandparents probably left because there were sanctions and a blockade strangling the country of all economic opportunity.
I tell you why my grandpa left is because he was trying to make a deal with Batista and become a monopoly in transport in Cuba, and then he helped some Batista people that were not good, and then he was arrested and had to leave. But the whole family is like, it's so hilarious, right? I have this history in my family where my uncle was trained in Guatemala in a CIA base to go invade Cuba at the Bay of Pigs, and now I'm a target of the CIA. And I have my WhatsApp group with them, and it is hilarious. I try to stay off my politics because I know that they will just literally kick me out of the group.
Oh man!
In case people are wondering why Vanessa's screen went so dark, they cut the power in Syria at like every evening at 8. If we can just
they
see your
change
smile, Vanessa, which is
I know, I
gorgeous.
noticed that, which is really weird.
No, it's wonderful. It's beautiful.
Yeah, so communism is anything that is,
communism is
not
anything that's to
conservative.
the left of Dick Cheney's trigger finger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
American political discourse and ideology and thought process has been so intentionally dumbed down since like the 60s that we've got people now who recognize that there are 72 genders but only think binary in terms of their politics. I was at lunch the other day, and I was talking to my boss about the election, and I was going off as I normally do, and a random woman bought our lunch, and we didn't find out until the next day that she did so because she thought that we were Republicans because we were openly criticizing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Hey, you got free lunch.
Got a free lunch.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm like, are you
honestly.
fucking kidding me? Like, I'm glad that this woman didn't decide to talk to us. You know,
Maybe you would have I don't know, put some sense into her. I don't know. I like speaking to people that are very binary and I like asking questions, challenging questions. That's when things get interesting.
I do take some form of cynical enjoyment though when like I'll get Trump supporters that follow me all the time because I'll take like my obligatory shot at Barack Hunt Obama, or like I'll say something about Kamala and be like, hey, remember when her Jamaican dad like disavowed her? And then I'll get a couple Trump followers and then like scroll down my timeline just a bit and I'm calling him like, yeah, Trump is a tool of the deep state and he ain't gonna do shit. And it's like these people think that I'm on their side, or vice versa. When they see me criticizing Trump, they think that I'm like a Biden supporter. And so I'm like, no, I hate Joe Biden. And even if I don't support him, I didn't vote for him either. I voted for Gloria LaRiva. Like, I don't support any of this and I don't legitimize this system regardless of what you think or how you want to generalize me. So it's kind of cynically enjoying to deal with that. But it is also, it's also good when you can, really talk to them and like open their mind a bit.
I've always wished that we the rest of the world would get a vote in the world's government. I think it would be much more interesting.
Well, rather than just putting unelected psychopaths in charge of most of it, I agree.
Well, I'm saying, imagine having Syrians and Guatemalans and Argentinians and Europeans going through the primaries and the who's who. I mean, it would be fucking interesting because at the end of the day, I mean, everybody is affected by the foreign policy of the United States, right? So, but
damn, it's such a good point too.
You're so right.
Our domestic policy in the U.S. is intrinsically tied to our foreign policy, and the amount of people who realize that
Oh, there
are
he is.
very few and far between.
Right, Watt's back.
I'm back. Sorry, I didn't get that last bit.
Oh, I just said the amount of Americans that realize that our domestic policy here in the States is intrinsically tied to our foreign policy is like minimal. And when we've got an empire in the stages of full collapse, as we are, all we have is a war economy. All we have is this sort of like exporting global terrorism as our main product. And when people can't put two and two together there, it makes me, I don't know, whatever sad and angry is in German. I'm sure there's a clever word.
Did you ever see that Oliver Stone documentary called, I think, South of the Border it's called? He interviewed President Kirchner, not Christina, but her husband when he was still alive. And he said that obviously Argentina at that time was going through major problems because of IMF. And he met George Bush. And George Bush told him, you know what you need? You need a good old war. That'll fix all your problems. And I just thought, that's
so American.
It's quintessentially.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
God, what have we become, Steve?
It's that meme where they ask each other if they're the baddies.
Ugh.
You know,
like
I mean,
two astronauts, and then the ones pointing like the gun to the back of their head, like we always have been. Or am I thinking of a different meme?
I'm just gonna think of the Spider-Man.
I'll tell you something that makes me hopeful. Something that does make me hopeful is that people don't really pay attention to Latin America, but in Latin America there's a lot of very interesting things happening. There is re-emergence. I mean, there was an emergence of a progressive movement a few years ago, and that kind of died down a little bit, but it's coming back. We have it in Mexico, in Ecuador. It's most likely going to be again the same as, well, Correa was going to run as vice president. He wasn't allowed, but I personally know the guy that's running, Andres Arau. He's a genius, that guy, and he is spot on. And you know how these countries have managed to get their population out of poverty, create free healthcare, free education. This is something great that's happening. It's happening in Ecuador. Bolivia just got a new left-wing president after the
totally illegitimate ousting of Evo Morales, and after the coup, the CIA-sponsored coup for Elon Musk's precious lithiums for his stupid Teslas. Yeah, it was very great to see Bolivia just really rise up and not only fight for their elections, but get that movement back in.
Well, they got rid of that.
I mean, we have Argentina as well. We have Mexico. This is I mean, Central America is a little bit trickier because Central America is like Florida, and that's because there wasn't a Cold War in Central America. There was a very bloody war in Guatemala. It lasted 36 years.
Oh, that's insane.
And when Congress passed the bill after the Nicaragua disaster of a plane crash, and they passed a bill not to help the Contras, what the United States did was move the arms trade through Israel. So it's very interesting. You see a military dude today, they still have either an M16 or a Galil A Galil is a AK-47 made in Israel that takes M16 bullets, or it takes AK-47 bullets. And that's the same in El Salvador or Honduras. I spent a lot of time with military people, low level military guys. Used to be very afraid of them. Now they're actually the good guys. And the police has become something to really fear.
I
Here
mean,
too.
I live in America. I've always been scared to death of the police, but that's usually
Steve.
I
Yeah,
think I was
try being the son of one. That's fun.
Oh,
let me tell you.
Condolences.
I got my head split open by the police for the first time in 1999. And it was supposed to like be a deterrent, but apparently what that does is guarantee that I'll be an activist for the rest of my life. We may be getting to a point, because look, man, Joe Biden gets elected and COVID is immediately cured because tens of thousands of people are all in the street together. I'm wondering if that celebration that's been going on for the last like 24 hours with all these people, not practicing safe social distancing, is going to be used as an excuse for a second wave and another lockdown. I know in the UK they've been locking down again
It's full lockdown.
And the protests that are going on just aren't being covered here at all. I know in Germany
yesterday there was four arrests at a Assange protest. You're not allowed to protest.
And they've been arresting press over here too. I think it was Tuesday night they arrested members of the National Lawyers Guild here in LA, and then Tuesday and Wednesday night they arrested members of the press. And then about like a couple weeks before in LA, the Board of Supervisors recently approved that LAPD could obtain their own footage of protests, whether via like regular cameras or via their little helicopters that are always flying around. So there's more surveillance aspect in that. And there's few people covering what's happening in LA. And it's for all of the, alleged members of the independent media that are based in LA, there's been lackluster and just overall pathetic coverage of what's going on, like on the ground here.
So shout out to the Convo Couch for being like one of the very few organizations at all that will go out and go to a protest and cover it. Vanessa, I would love to get your opinion on this. Do you think that I know that protest has just been more or less criminalized in the UK? Is this going to be one of those things where the Five Eyes countries are testing out like the effectiveness of criminalizing protest? Do you think we're going to see that more widespread in the West?
Well, I mean, it's been in existence in France for what is it now? Way more than is it 2 years now? I've actually lost track of the Yellow Vest movement because it was started up. Yeah, it's almost 2 years actually.
Yeah.
So it was already criminalized. Even before that, of course, they criminalized effectively the pro-Palestinian meetings and protests in France, right? So then the Yellow Vest movement, which for 2 years has effectively been criminalized. Of course, people are still going out on the streets even during, because France is back under lockdown as well. Now in the UK, I mean, in Liverpool, they're rolling out the army to basically ensure that lockdown is maintained, but also to give out vaccinations long term. because now, of course, we're hearing that the government has flip-flopped. Now vaccinations will be compulsory. Scientists are pressuring the vaccine manufacturers to produce by Christmas. So we have a really nice toxic Christmas in the UK. Children are going to be used as you know, testing particularly for the AstraZeneca vaccine, which of course is terrifying. Having
and one of the volunteers for that Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine actually died too.
Did she die, or was it transverse myelitis? She was effectively paralyzed. I didn't hear that she died. If she did, that will be pretty awful.
I might be thinking of one of the other like 67 shady manufacturers of the COVID vaccine.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of shady stuff with the Oxford AstraZeneca one specifically.
The Oxford AstraZeneca one, I thought there were two cases. One confirmed of transverse myelitis, which is effectively paralysis, and then another case which they were pretty certain was also transverse myelitis, but I don't think it was ever confirmed. I could be wrong. It could be that one of them actually died. But in any case, you know, I mean, Whitney's written about this whole warp speed thing, but it's terrifying. Not to mention the DNA altering kind of components in the vaccine, and the fact that now in the UK they're talking about, oh, they're going to give it to the most vulnerable, so they're going to give it to the elderly at Christmas, right, when, you know, sickness levels are at their highest and they're being refused DNR, they're being or resuscitation, they're being refused medical treatment, and they're being abandoned and isolated in care homes, which is where the greatest number of deaths have been registered, right? I mean, this whole COVID thing is just insane. But I think what we're seeing, for example, with the mass protests or the people coming out on the streets for whatever reason, whether it's to you know, defend Trump, whether it's to support Biden, I don't think this is going to be an easy transition. I think they're going to manufacture a situation where Trump will refuse to leave the White House, where he's going to be calling corruption, and he will be right. He will be absolutely correct, of course. But it's going to be escalated, right? In my opinion. This is going to descend into complete chaos, and COVID, to a large degree, will be forgotten. COVID is the gateway to hell. COVID is the opening of the floodgates for complete martial law, totalitarian state, reduction to serfdom of the majority of the population, dependency on the state, loss of livelihood, child poverty, AI. You know, everyone's going to be digitally processed. I mean, even in Syria, the CIA are introducing education programs in the kind of US proxy controlled refugee camps, right, in Idlib, so in the northwest and the northeast. So via Chemonics, which is a CIA outreach agent, they're controlling the education. So this means fast tracking of Syrian refugees, not only into a propagandized environment, of course, not adhering to the Syrian educational curriculum, but also programming them for AI. They're introducing AI into education centers via their kind of NGO complex organizations, of which White Helmets are a part. But the White Helmets, the Violets, all of these organizations funded by deep state are now bringing in all this AI, digital technology into education, into, you know, vulnerable people's camps.
I don't want to interrupt. I just want you to repeat what you were saying. You were saying, because I lost you. They're introducing AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
In what sense? How are they introducing these?
They're introducing programs. I've written about this to quite an extent. They're introducing programs that are run by the CIA effectively to introduce literally robotics. So they're bringing robotics into the classroom. Of course, COVID already in these camps, if we're focusing on these camps, but for me, it's a microcosm of what's happening universally. So the kids are already being distanced by this dehumanization of the people that are interacting with them, the effect of the mask, the effect of people being literally in hazmat suits, the effect that you can't touch each other. Then bringing in robotics to teach them, so distance learning, introducing them to non-human educators, right? This is actually happening in these camps. It's extraordinary.
Can you film that?
Yeah, there are images of programs. Yeah, I've just Google search robotics and Idlib. You'll find it quite easily.
Meanwhile,
yeah, I was just gonna say, it's interesting that you bring up like propaganda and the education and the CIA push like education mechanisms that go into this, because I think the Syrian war in particular might be like one of, if not the most just heavily propagandized wars ever, because literally like I was literally like, what, 12, 13 in middle school when the war was first popping off. And I like very clearly remember like all the marketing as like a humanitarian conflict. Like everybody remembers that picture of like little Omar sitting in the chair in the ambulance, like covered in debris and blood, not mentioning the fact that the white helmets literally like ripped him away from his family and kept them separated, and didn't even bother to check up on him after. And that's actually how I first found Eva Bartlett, was because I wanted to know like, oh, what happened to this little boy? And like they put out all the posters of like all these children, and then manufactured like the whole emotional thing where it's like, why wouldn't Trump let these poor kids come into this country, like coming from a war-torn Syria? And just so I just remember like so vividly how much like manufacturing of empathy and like emotional manipulation to make this into like a huge humanitarian conflict like went into this war, with no mention of the fact that it was completely manufactured by like the US, Saudis, like terrorists and all kinds of like other Western powers.
It was an incubator baby's redo.
Well, and I think, I mean, for me, it's a really good point that you made. I think, you know, Syria, I think I'm trying to think, but I don't think we've ever seen such mass exploitation of children, you know, like save the children, make war, drop bombs on them, you know, bring them peace. If we go back to BBC Panorama, Saving Syria's Children, you know, that was the first major staged event of the war, staged by the BBC. Hello. You know, so where children...
Is this documentary, is it radio only, or is it video?
Which one? The upcoming one?
The Channel 4 one.
Oh, no, Radio 4 one. Yeah, that's audio only.
I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna. The thing is, radio. I mean, they're not gonna reach a lot of people.
Well, and
the whole
you know,
country's on lockdown.
Yeah,
so they might. We can really go anywhere.
I mean, it's good that it's radio and not television. That's what I'm saying. If it's a slander piece of shit, it's good that it's radio and not television.
Yeah, I mean, I'm, like I've said before, I'm trying to look at it positively. I'm looking at it that hopefully we're going to get a whole lot of spooks coming out of the shadows and having to come forward to defend the whole construct. So we're going to actually be given a lot more information to work on than we would have been normally. But yeah, I mean, just going back to the children aspect, you're right. I mean, the story of Omran, but the amount of times that children have been used to sell a narrative. Aylan Kurdi, who remembers the kids washed up on where was it? It was in Greece, wasn't it? On the shore. You know, kids have been weaponized in such a, all the chemical attacks. I mean, in Duma, who murdered the children that were arranged for the photo shoot for the alleged Duma chemical attack? And even a BBC producer has outed that as an arranged marketing image, you know, with murdered children. Yet nobody in the mainstream media or in the UN or in all these humanitarian organizations is actually asking the question, well, hang on, who killed the kids then? Right? You know, the kids they're expendable. They're, as we hate to say, collateral damage, but collateral damage in war marketing. I mean, Syria has plumbed depths that really are so horrendous. Sometimes if I sit and think about it, they should all be in Guantanamo Bay, a lot of them, all of them, that created and manufactured the narrative of this war and effectively had those children killed in order to maintain this war while claiming they're protecting the children. I mean, it's the depth of cynicism. It's the depth of sadism against this country. And it's ongoing, you know, with the war harvest, the child trafficking, the organ trafficking, everything that comes out of war has been plundered out of Syria. And it's not only the resources, it's the human resources.
And the other side of that is the using children as marketing to sell the Fourth Industrial Revolution or Klaus Schwab's Great Reset.
Yeah, exactly.
Sunrise Movement in particular is a prime example of this, but yeah, Greta Thunberg as well. Like, I mean, she was a marketing creation.
Yeah.
You know,
and Cory Morningstar has written, you know, a whole tome about that, and I highly recommend everyone reading it if you haven't already read it. Very pleased
to announce that next Sunday we'll be joined by Cory Morningstar.
Yay! Brilliant. I love her.
Only took 2 years. But
she's quite reclusive, but she was my inspiration, actually.
Yeah, she went on Whitney's podcast earlier in the last week or something like that, and a friend of mine saw it and tagged me in it and was like, "Hey, did you know that Cory and Whitney had a conversation?" And I was like, "Yes, I did, and I'm not bitter. Can't wait to listen." And a couple of days later, she messaged me and she was like, "Okay, I'll come on your show." You know, dude, I'll take the pity fuck at this point. I will. I'll take it. Let's have a conversation.
You've been trying to get her on since I've been here, what, a year almost?
Oh yeah. Probably been 18 months or more. The minute that the manufacturing of Greta Thunberg for Consent was published, and I was like one of the 7 people on the planet to see it and scream about it, I was trying to get her on the show. So I'm really, really pleased about that. We've got it coming at us on all sides, and to kind of bring it back to the CIA-based education with machine learning and whatnot, here in the States, Eric Schmidt is now going to be in charge of smart city implementation. We're going to start in New York City, and there will be smart schools that rolled out as well. I just saw a tweet this morning. There was a guy who was cheering on Joe Biden because Biden's already talking about, you know, AI driven, I don't know, well, smart cities essentially, but they don't call it that. But it's, you know, they have these programs for like mobility for elderly or infirm citizens, and all of it is wrapped up in AI, and all of it is wrapped up in the Internet of Things and the constant surveillance that comes with it. And I want to bring it back to Julian Assange real quick, because he said that we are the last free generation. We're the last people that remember what it was like, you know, before the blatant draconian tech-led surveillance. And
we owned an encyclopedia, man. We owned an encyclopedia in our house.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you something about Eric Schmidt. I don't know if you guys know this story. It's probably when Google met WikiLeaks. But when Julian Assange and Sarah Harrison and Joseph Farrell were desperately trying to get a hold of the State Department to help reduce the minimization of harm, because there was a malicious third party.
Aw, damn it. Fuck off, Kevin.
Oh, it's I want to hear this story too.
I know.
The suspense
because
is killing.
I've read when Google met WikiLeaks, but it's been a couple of years now.
Okay, so very quickly before I drop out again. So Sarah and Julian are crazily trying to get a hold of somebody high up at the State Department to tell them, you know, the password that the Guardian released is being, you know, somebody has found a file that might use the, you know, might actually get the complete files, the complete unredacted cables. And there's a third party trying to do this, to try to get people to find it on the internet. And I mean, this happened, right? In the end, Cryptome on the 1st of September published the entire trove of unredacted cables, right? So for weeks before, Julian Assange and Sarah were trying to warn the NGOs like Human Rights Watch and the State Department to accelerate their harm minimization process, because this was going to happen. And they didn't know when, but it was gonna. So they finally get up to a certain level where they go, okay, we need to confirm if you're really you. And then they just didn't say anything. And suddenly Joseph Farrell receives an email.
No.
I can't remember her name right now. And she had visited Julian in not in the embassy, it was in Norfolk, when he was in Norfolk with Eric Schmidt. That's where the book came from. And as soon as they got back, obviously she went and reported to Hillary Clinton about the meeting, and she was the person that was used to verify that Sarah Harrison was actually the person calling the State Department to warn them about these impending releases. So, you know, the Eric Schmidt is as far as I see it, a arm of the State Department and probably the military-industrial complex.
100%. Absolutely. Eric Schmidt chairs DARPA's AI division. Like he's on these the public private partnership sort of sphere that gives no accountability whatsoever to the government, because they can hide behind private corporations with, you know, proprietary software and trade secrets and all of these non-disclosures and whatnot. It is eliminated the line between tech and government. There's no space between them anymore. And Google has the world's largest search engine, and they have the second world's largest search engine in YouTube, and YouTube is also the first, the largest video platform on the planet. And they're tied up in our national security and in the systems that we use to deploy smart weapons. And it's, I don't know, fucking creepily nefarious. It really is.
Do they still own Boston Dynamics?
I'm not sure. I'm not. But
oh God, that would be frightening.
I know that when Alphabet came about, they bought Boston Dynamics. I don't know if you've heard of Boston Dynamics.
Oh yeah,
those scary dog fucking things.
Scary company. And by the way, it's already being used. You know, their little robots are being used in Indonesia or somewhere like that for COVID situations. To tell the people social distance, etc., etc.
They're just going to strap a gun onto the damn thing.
I was seeing a two-legged robot the other day. It was incredible. It was just like you can see that this is just so weaponizable that there's no other reason for it to exist. So yeah. As far as I know, Alphabet owns Boston Dynamics, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they sold it.
I mean, it makes sense, and it's frightening as fuck, and it's only a short amount of time before they're legit manufacturing Daleks.
I mean, it makes complete sense. It makes complete sense that Google owns Boston Dynamics when they own the world's most sophisticated mapping system in the world, right?
Mm.
So how are you going to best control these systems? Yeah, it's scary shit. Google should be antitrusted very quickly.
I mean, I agree. I do. The problem with that, at least historically in the US, is that once you break up the company, the people on the boards pretty much overnight become wealthier. It happened in the case of Standard Oil and John D. Rockefeller. He became the world's first billionaire that way. Not until after they lost their antitrust case. But again, I mean, our legal system is a fucking joke, and it's catered to, our legislative system is catered to making sure that, the wealthiest 0.01% don't experience a moment of discomfort. We've been going nearly 2 hours now, and I've got a bunch of stuff to do before our next show. So I'm going to give both of you an opportunity to give some final thoughts here and to let people know where they can find your work. And if you have anything that's upcoming, feel free to plug it.
Okay. You go first, I think, because you're more interesting. You're way more interesting.
I'm here, absolutely transfixed.
You're both fascinating, but Beeley's way better looking than you, Juan.
I'm what? I missed that.
Oh, I said you're better looking than Juan, but you're both fascinating.
Yeah, he's only saying that because I'm in the dark.
Okay, I'll go first. My name is Juan Passarelli.
Oh, damn it, you cut out.
Poor Juan.
I do have a link in the description to the documentary.
Okay. Yeah, in the description is Juan's latest documentary, which
cool.
highly recommend you watch.
It's very good. And I also got all their Twitters, and I've got Vanessa's Patreon in there and the website.
Cool.
Yes, I need to follow your work more closely, Vanessa. The problem with me right now is that anything that is outside Julian Assange, I am not paying attention to, and this has been going on for about 8 months, so I really don't know. I should, I'm a journalist with one single cause, and
No, I get
I'm
that.
kind of like, the rest of the world doesn't exist unless it affects Julian Assange. But this will have to change sometime soon. And I have been following this whole documentary situation with the white helmets and the huge critiques that has gotten. It's not even been released, but I have seen it on the internet. It's the only thing I've seen is it's bullshit. But it doesn't surprise me coming from Channel 4, to be honest.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
It would surprise me even less if it came from the BBC, but
No, it is coming from the BBC. It is coming from the BBC. It's BBC Radio 4.
Ah, all right. So it's not channel.
Yeah, no, it's Radio 4,
okay.
BBC. So it's perfectly normal.
Awful institution on the fucking planet right now.
Yeah, exactly. They haven't solved war.
Say, I'd rather watch internal, reportage of Russia, reported by Russia Today, than reportage from the UK reported by the BBC. Their coverage of the election, by the way, was fascinating.
BBC or Russia Today?
The BBC. Russia Today was more interesting. The BBC was just like Biden's winning. I mean, first thing they were like pro Biden.
No, I mean the BBC. Really, it's a sad institution now, actually. But anyway, let's not go down that bunny hole because I'll stay there all night. but no, I mean, I think, look, I'm kind of relishing this whole series for the reasons I said, and for the fact that we've kept our powder dry, to use a really old-fashioned expression. There is more stuff we're going to be releasing over the next 10 days to 2 weeks, and they're not expecting a lot of it. So there's a lot of broadsides coming in from our side. Bellingcat, who's embedded in this whole little MI6 kind of complex, have just so royally screwed up by publishing this letter that they claimed was sent by Fernando Arias to one of the whistleblowers that Bellingcat has named, which is also, just criminal on behalf of Bellingcat, because there is legal proceedings against the OPCW, and they've just named the protagonist who'd kept his identity secret up until that point. So number one, that means that there is a mole inside the OPCW that is leaking information to Bellingcat and other MI6 linked organizations. I won't mention Chris York of Huffington Post. I didn't say that at all. Sorry if this gets taken down off YouTube.
We don't care. We have other platforms.
Yeah, we're on Rockfin and DLive and Odyssey as well. So we're fully expecting to be taken off of YouTube like any moment.
I spent the last month backing up our channel for the inevitability.
So yeah, Ninja has come through for us.
Always.
So yeah, just basically watch this space. There's hopefully going to be a whole lot more information coming out, which is going to supersede their documentary, however many humanitarian lawyers they managed to bring into the studio to try and portray us all as war criminal associates.
Get them.
Right. I'm sorry. What is that space again? Sorry.
Space.
Where can I see your work?
I have a Patreon. Otherwise, I'm generally published at Unlimited Hangout, Last American Vagabond, where else? RT, although I'm not an RT journalist, as the BBC wanted to portray me. But mostly on my Patreon.
We are
everything gets republished there.
We are like hours to a day away from launching Slow News Day's website. And if you don't mind, I would like to republish your work too.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, I'm not at all. I'm not as prolific as Whitney. She drives me crazy. It's like how many things can you write in a week?
She is the brain breaker.
Oh God, yeah.
And feel free to use the documentary. The Spanish version is coming soon.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, you can.
Let us know when that comes out, and we'll get that to Nat.
Mm.
Well, I was supposed to be doing it today, and then I remembered I had. Well, Steve reminded me that I had this.
Well, I'm glad you came. This is a great conversation.
Yeah, it was great to meet you virtually.
You too. You too.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you very much for everything, guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you, Juan.
And I'm looking forward to seeing Cory on.
Yeah, me too. Oh my.
I'm gonna tease her about that now.
Okay. By all means, do. Please do. Glory, what you got?
This was an awesome conversation, and I really, really needed it after all this election mayhem and nonsense and just absolute shit show full of self-preserving ass cunts who don't give a shit about any of us. It was really nice to go and talk about real stuff here and just rant whatever. So yeah. Nice to meet both of you. I really appreciate it. And again, thanks for your work, Vanessa, because it was really helpful in my Syria policy paper. So
send me the policy paper if you can.
If I can find it, yes.
So that's gonna do it for the show today. I want to do for our Rockfin only show later this afternoon, evening, whatever. I want to do another Slow News Day moderator stream. So if you're watching right now and your name is in blue and there's a wrench next to it because Steve got high the first night we were in DC in September and made like 80 of you moderators, hit me up through email. I'll make sure it gets thrown into the chat. spsnd@protonmail.com. If you want to be on, I want to do this around 4:00 my time, so 7:00 on the East Coast. Then we'll do another moderator show, which was fun as fuck the last time we did it. So I don't see why it wouldn't be this time. Huge thanks to Juan Passarelli and Vanessa Beeley and Glory Jones and Sleepy Josh on the ones and twos.
Woo, Tech Ninja.
To everyone watching right now, I fucking love you guys. Thanks for being here and being a part of this. And we'll see you soon. Good luck to us all.
I always meet interesting people. I just want to be here every week so I can meet more. It was great to meet you, Vanessa. I will definitely be following your work.
Really, yeah, brilliant. I loved it. I loved being able to rant. Thanks.